This painting is by Fra Angelico, one of the leading artists of the early Renaissance. He was active mainly in Florence, but for a time he was also painter to the popes in Rome. This is a religious work, like many painted during the Renaissance, when the church was among the main clients for painters. It shows Mary and the child Jesus. She's dressed in blue and he's dressed in pink. Let's consider in this painting what comes from the past and what announces the future. Or said in different words, let's see how this painting fits into the sequence that we call the history of art. The materials used by the painter are somewhat old-fashioned. We see a lot of expensive gold and blue made from the expensive mineral lapis, which was mined in Afghanistan. Contemporaries would have recognized the material cost of the painting. They would have valued it for how expensive the materials were. What is new, what comes with the Renaissance, is value placed on the talent of the artist and not on the cost of the materials. A bit of this is already visible here. In an earlier painting, the gold cloth in the background typically would have been flat, nothing but a gold surface. Here gold is used, but it looks like a real curtain. We see its folds, as it is held by two angels in the background. The blue garments worn by the Virgin also fold realistically. The use of symbols in the painting is an aspect of Renaissance art that is linked with the past. Here we see that the Virgin and Child carry flowers. They are symbols that refer to their purity. Remember that paintings cannot use words, written or spoken, to tell their stories. They need to use symbols. But there was a general tendency in the history of art towards a less symbolic and more realistic way of painting. Symbolism will continue to be used, but it will be more disguised, less apparent as we move into the future. What is modern about this painting is what can be considered realistic. Two things mainly. One is the psychological rendering of expression. In the Virgin, for example, we feel the tenderness of her gesture. We can believe in her. She offers protection to her son and to us. We don't need to be religious to empathize with this aspect of the painting. The picture is also somewhat realistic in the rendition of a realistic-looking three-dimensional space, especially in comparison with older paintings. Look at the ledge in the foreground. It looks like a step that leads into the depth of the picture. Look also at the figures, especially the baby Jesus. He looks round, three-dimensional. In the past, he would have looked flat. This painting, like all paintings, shows features that are characteristic not only of a time and place, but also of an individual artist. Contemporaries wrote about Fra Angelico as someone who was especially pious and who was able to transmit this to his paintings and to make his public feel it. Indeed, we can sense this ourselves. We can feel the genuine and sweet feelings of the figures in the painting. This picture is also by Fra Angelico. It is a painting that includes various paintings. It is called a polyptych. Paintings with three paintings are called triptychs, with two paintings that are called diptychs. This type of painting would soon become outdated, as painters and patrons gradually showed a preference for paintings with one single scene. The beautiful golden frame is also somewhat old-fashioned. The pointed arches are typical of Gothic or late medieval architecture, and not of the Renaissance. The range of colors is typical of the early Renaissance. They are light and opaque, with much gold. You will learn to recognize late medieval or early Renaissance Italian paintings when you see this type of color. To some extent, these colors are a matter of taste, but it also has to do with technique. Paintings in the early Renaissance in Italy were painted in a technique that we call tempera. Pigments were diluted in water and then mixed with egg yolk. The result was the range of tones that we see here. The small scenes that we see in the bottom are known as predella paintings. Predella was the Italian name given to the bottom of these large structures or frames. Here we see the predella from the lower left of the large polyptych that we just saw. It shows images from the life of St. Nicholas, the saint that was represented immediately above. To the left we see his birth. He already looks like a saint, with a halo above his head. In the center we see his education, and to the right one of the miracles that he is said to have conducted. He's leaving money at a window. Through the door we see a sleeping man. He's a father who was said to have lost all his money and to have prostituted his daughters to gain it back. The daughters are in bed in the background, sleeping. For our purpose of explaining early Renaissance paintings, the content of the image matters less than its form. It matters less than how it is painted. I want you to focus on two features of this picture. One is the emphatic effort to create the impression of recession into a three-dimensional space. Renaissance artists thought of paintings as windows that opened up into a realistic-looking space. Much of the effort of Fra Angelico here goes into showing his ability to make the painting look realistic in this sense. Look at the side walls of the two buildings in the painting, at the right and left. They recede into very exaggerated angles to make sure that we feel this recession into a three-dimensional space. This would have made the painting look very modern when it was created. A second feature of the painting that I want you to notice is the type of building that we see here. The arches, the ornaments, the round shape of the building in the background, the triangular shape of the top of another building, they're all inspired by the very latest developments in modern architecture, which in turn was inspired by the architecture of ancient Greece and Rome. It is surprising to see that such contemporary architecture is used in a polyptych with a very Gothic or late medieval frame. Perhaps it was easier for the artist, or the patron, to look modern in a small secondary image and not in a large frame. We don't know. But the tension between past and present, between tradition and innovation, is very obvious here, as it very often is in the history of art.